Welcome back, and for the top of our entertainment center we're going to start with this rough sawn slab and prep it for an epoxy pour. First things first, let's start cleaning up the edges. We'll use our draw knife here. It's the most efficient way to remove this bark, and then we'll clean up all the little details. Let's continue with our draw knife, taking off as much of that material as possible in order to make it easier for the cleanup in a little bit here. Here we'll take a chisel and clean out some of the recessed areas. It's much easier than attempting to sand in there. Now a little 60 grit here to clean up the surface while leaving it rough enough for the epoxy to adhere to. Now that the sanding's done, let's start cutting these out to close to our finished dimensions. I'm going to cut this board to 6'4", leaving 4 inches of wiggle room. So what I want here with this cut is for the epoxy portion of the top to be more towards the front as not to be hidden by the television. So our cut here will push that whole epoxy section more forward in the piece. As you can see with my cut there, the front of our piece is starting to match up to the facets of our finished top while keeping the epoxy more forward in the piece. I'm just masking off the edge here. This way we can caulk it to our form in a little while to keep the epoxy in the hole where it belongs. Now that the masking tape is applied, I want to trim that all the way to the edge there to keep it out of our epoxy. Less cleanup later. As you can see, I taped the bottom of the form where the epoxy will be, and now I'm caulking our masked area for it to adhere. With the pieces cut to fit the form, we're going to caulk and install the end piece. I built this form ahead of time using some melamine. There are some tips and tricks that will greatly improve the quality of your form and the end product. I will gladly do a video on that at a later date. It's the same thing on this side. We're just going to caulk and install our end form piece. This is a very important step in the epoxy pouring process. What I'm doing here is I'm getting an average width in order to calculate how much epoxy I'm going to need to mix for this process. So we're just working our way down the line, getting some numbers. I'm going to total them up and kind of roughly divide by the length there. Let's do the math. This is our average width, this is our thickness, and this is the length of our piece. Multiplying our width by our thickness by our length, we get approximately 350 cubic inches. There are 1728 cubic inches in 1 cubic foot. 1 cubic foot equals 7.5 gallons. 350 divided by 1728 is approximately 0.21. 0.21 times 7.5 gives us approximately 1.5 gallons. So the math is fairly simple, and it will save you a lot of money mixing epoxy, because epoxy is quite expensive. The epoxy I'm using here is a 2-part to 1-part mixed by weight, so here I am weighing it out. Now I'm going to add a little mica powder. Gold is the color we're going to use, with some teal highlights. So let's start with the bulk of our mix, a little bit of gold. I'm using an electric paddle on low. The reason you want to mix for a long time and on low is to keep as many air bubbles out as possible. The more air you have in there, the more voids you could potentially create. So we'll take our time, mix it up thoroughly. Thoroughness is very important here. They don't readily mix together, but in order for the chemical reaction to take place, thorough mixing is required. Pouring is the best part, because it's a lot of work getting all the form work done, the boards ready, everything watertight, because that's really what it needs to be for epoxy. So really getting to this point, the satisfaction is wonderful. Now here I am just using my heat gun to just get rid of any air bubbles that are coming up to the surface. I'm doing this midway through my pour, and then I will do it again at the end. Now we're filled to the tippy top. Let's use the heat gun to get rid of any bubbles. I'm going to mix up a little bit of teal to add some highlights to our piece. Using a syringe, I'm going to inject some of this teal epoxy into the gold that's already in our pour. As I'm doing this, you'll see the teal slowly start to bubble to the surface, highlighting and kind of offsetting that gold color. Yay, 2 days have gone by. Let's get this out of our form and start working with our manufactured board here. Clean up all that tape, pull the masking tape off, get it ready to go into the planer. It is worth noting here, this pour was about as clean as can be, no leaks whatsoever. I strongly encourage anybody building a form to take their time and do it right. Now we have the planer set. We're going to mill this down to a true 1 inch and get it ready to be cut up into the shape we desire. Here you see we're getting down to the epoxy. The board's getting flattened. Everything's going to be real nice to work with in a few minutes. This is what we're looking for here, flat, nice, and ready to be worked with. Color looks good, and a perfect 1 inch. To get our board from the 12 inches that just came out of the planer, we are gonna take some 1 inch boards, glue them to the back of it, and get it to about 19 inches so we can work with it to get our 18 inch top. Steel cawls on both ends just to keep it flat. Alright, all glued up, ready to cut this into the shape we need it to be. This is the shape we want to make for our top, and like I said before, we want to keep the epoxy as close to the faceted front as possible. I'm going to start by getting some reference points. A square corner is a great place to start. So let's cut that. We're going to work off the back, and in my case here, the right side. This type of stuff is the perfect application for a track saw. There's just no beating them. They cut perfect straight lines. Now we have something to reference. Let's get our board cut to a perfect 6 feet. Now that our back and our width are established, let's cut the depth of our top here and get it to a true 18 inches. That way we can work on the facets. Time for the facets. The plans there say I need to measure out 1 foot here, so let's do that. And then we need to come over. We're going to work off the right side. We're going to come over and measure out 2 foot for our first facet, connecting that 2 foot point to the 1 foot point we had measured previously. Same thing on the left hand side. I'm going to transfer those marks to the top. That way we have a point to reference from. With our points all marked, I'm going to take this straight edge. As you can see, I really do like the aluminum extrusion for straight edges. They do a wonderful job. But we're just going to connect the dots. Put our track saw in place and cut out our facets. This is our last cut, and look at that shape. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.